Words matter. And when you're living with MS, many words can be complex, confusing, and even scary at times. But learning more about the words we use when we're talking about MS can be empowering. Staying in the know can help people be accurate when they describe their MS and be proactive in their care. Let's learn more together. Welcome to this edition of Wise Up Words and Why They Matter. I'm John Strum, and joining me for today's conversation is Alex. Alex is a care partner for his wife, Nicole, who lives with relapsing-remitting MS. Thanks for joining us today, Alex.
Oh, thanks for having me, John. I appreciate it.
I want to start off our conversation with a two-part question.
Mhm.
When was Nicole diagnosed with MS? And when was it that you recognized your role as a care partner?
Yeah, Nicole was diagnosed. She had her first episode on a trip to France, and she was diagnosed in the hospital, which is a bit atypical, right? Because they usually wait till the second one. But officially, I guess it was 2016, 2017. And my role as a care partner, I think I started once I heard the diagnosis in France because my aunt has had MS since the 80s. And I realized, from an arm's length, what kind of issues that we may face. But I think, yeah, probably a couple years in when Nicole's mobility started dropping off on a couple things.
Just like getting an MS diagnosis itself. I think care partners belong to a club that no one ever asked to join. And it's a club that doesn't receive much recognition. So that role of being a care partner, it's often overlooked. As you took on care related responsibilities, did you experience any kind of a learning curve?
Absolutely, I did. Yeah, I think my biggest learning curve was patience and communication. This is a bit of a self admission, but I can be impatient and I can be maybe a bit overbearing sometimes when I'm asking questions and I expect an answer. And so if Nicole isn't processing something, or wasn't, I guess at the time, processing something as quickly as she used to, at the speed I was used to, I would keep asking, or I would browbeat her, unfortunately. And I had to learn to wait until the buffering produced the answer she was looking for.
I'm glad you brought up communication because that's something that's vital in any relationship. And it's a particularly important aspect of a strong relationship between a care partner and the person they're caring for. Good communication requires thoughtful choices when it comes to the words we use. How have you seen language and words themselves impact your relationship as a care partner with Nicole?
So I think I've noticed them impact our communication in the way that I'm learning new words. I'm learning a whole new language, whether it's from a professional point of view, like the words that doctors use and nurses use. That's the language we have to use at home to convey the feelings that Nicole's having, or the symptoms that she's experiencing. Yeah, I think the impact is just learning the new words and using them in the right context. But having to explain it to people who don't have that experience is also interesting as well.
I'm really glad you brought that up because,
Mm,
as you mentioned, MS has a language all of its own: GMTs,
mm.
MRIs, lesions, progression. So, at this point, do you feel pretty fluent in the language of multiple sclerosis?
Yeah, and it certainly helps. I have friends who also have MS, and some of them are quite frank in their speech. So they use language like brain damage and things like that. So it's a brutal term, but from a frank point of view, I guess it's true as well. But yeah, absolutely. MRIs and CAT scans and all sorts of things like that are now in our sort of vocabulary.
So, how did that happen? What steps did you take to better inform yourself about MS and the words people use to describe various aspects of the disease?
Yeah, so I would read blogs and follow social media accounts of MS influencers, or people with disabilities. And through their what they share, I learn more of the verbiage that is consistently used to convey, like I said, the symptoms and struggles that they might have, or accomplishments for that matter. I've read some medical journals. I've gone to support groups for partners of people with disabilities, specifically with MS, And through those shared experiences, I learn more and more about the vocabulary.
Living with MS means learning how to be resilient, but
Mm,
that could be equally true for MS care partners. What
mm.
does resilience mean to you?
Resilience to me, I think, means that there are going to be there are probably going to be more difficult times in your life if you didn't have MS. And so, how you would adapt to those times shows your resilience. For instance, there are a lot of people with MS who have children. We don't. We decided not to have children. And as you grow older and your friends have kids, it's harder and harder to relate to their experience. And so the resilience portion of that is, I think, being able to adapt to those situations where you're in conversation and you can't adapt because of this. You have this sort of MS is hanging out in your living room and you have to work around it. And that's the resilience portion, but you still come out on top.
This series is all about words and why they matter. So, what one word comes to mind when you think of Nicole and her experience living with MS?
Yeah. So if I think about Nicole and her experience with MS, the one word that comes to mind is probably, it's not a medical word. I'm just going to say she's a legend because I think she does more research than I've ever done, and she learns and she does all the things that she needs to do to champion her disease or champion MS. And yeah, she stays with it. She is resilient. I don't know. She learns all the medications. She takes those things and she advocates for herself to her doctors and she puts up a fight when she thinks she needs to. So I think doing all that stuff makes her a legend.
And what word comes to mind when you think of your experience as a care partner?
Yeah, so the word that comes to mind as a care partner for me, that's a very good question. Sidekick, maybe, because I think she really takes the lead on championing her experience with MS, and I'm along for the ride. I suggested that she use a mobility aid before I think she decided to use a mobility aid. And so I think that's the work of a sidekick is to look out maybe just a couple steps ahead and provide the things that they're not providing for themselves because they're taking on so much more.
I'll just add that if Nicole has that space to educate herself, to do the research, to learn about all of the DMTs, the mobility aid options, and all the rest, if she's doing all that, I think you just might be legendary too. So I'll
Oh
I'll add
wow.
that as my word there.
Oh wow. Thanks, John. I appreciate that.
Alex, thanks for helping us wise up to the words you use as an MS care partner.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Absolutely.